Hello, I'm Evan Minton. Welcome to Cerebral Faith Live, or at least I'd like to say that it's live. This is actually pre-recorded audio that you're watching because I had been called into work today because a coworker, her knee went out. She had to go to the ER, and I'm going to have to cover for her for the entire weekend. And rather than preempt the stream completely, I thought a nice compromise would be to record the audio in the morning, hours before you would be watching it here on YouTube. So, unlike the normal streams, the normal Cerebral Faith Live episodes, uh, we will not be doing a Q&A session at the end of the presentation because I'm not here. You're not watching me live. This is pre-recorded audio, and so I won't. I At the time you're seeing this, and the time that you're hearing me to say these words, I'm probably going to be ringing someone up at a cash register. So yeah. But tonight's topic, we're going to be continuing from last week when we're going through a series on the Sermon on the Mount. We are exegeting Jesus' Sermon on the Mount as it is found in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. We started out looking at the Beatitudes, and we looked at what it means to be salt and light. After that, we looked at Jesus' attitude toward Old Testament law, and we saw that what R.L. Solberg calls the Torahist interpretation of that passage is not true. Jesus is not saying we are required to keep the entire law of Moses. Tonight, we're going to be looking at what Jesus had to say about anger and its connection to the commandment not to murder. And whether God actually punishes you for thinking certain things and feeling certain ways, whether anger of this kind is a punishable offense. And next Saturday at 8 o'clock, same time, same place, we are going to be looking at what adultery of the heart is and is not. What is lust? What does Jesus mean when he says, if you even look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart? And then the Saturday night after that, we're going to be looking at divorce. The Saturday night after that, it'll be what Jesus had to say about oaths. Is taking oaths always wrong in every time and place? Should you never swear anything? What's Jesus talking about here? And why is swearing an oath a bad thing? After that, we're going to be talking about loving your enemies, what that means, what it looks like, how you can love your enemies in your own life. And then the Saturday night after that, we're going to be looking at on keeping our good deeds secret, and then prayer, the antidote to anxiety. And then we're going to finish up with looking at Jesus, looking at the response of the crowd to everything Jesus said and did. Now, there might be an interruption in between our series. I do have the 10th anniversary of Cerebral Faith coming up, not the 10th anniversary of this YouTube channel, but the 10th anniversary of this ministry as a whole. And so I might do a stream one Saturday. One of these Sermon on the Mount streams might get preempted for that. Tim Stratton also wants to do a special before the end of the month. So, but for the most part, it will just be all of these weeks. Most of these weeks consecutively, we will be just doing PowerPoint or Canva presentations on these different topics on the Sermons on the Mount, the Sermon on the Mount. So let's get into our topic tonight. Jesus's teaching about murder and anger. Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 to 22. Quote, "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." End quote. So, what did Jesus mean here? Jesus said, "You've heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder.'" That's one of the 10 commandments. "Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." And then he goes on to say, "Anyone who says to your brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court. Anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." Is Jesus saying that you should never, ever, ever get angry at anyone for anything? Ever? Is Jesus saying that you should never say insulting things about people ever? Is there never a time and place for that? What did Jesus mean? Well, I don't think Jesus mean we should never, ever, ever get angry at anyone for anything, because just for the very simple reason that Jesus himself got angry. If anger simpliciter is what Jesus was condemning, Jesus would be a hypocrite and a sinner. Following Modus Taulin's reasoning, if Jesus, since Jesus is not a hypocrite and a sinner, therefore he cannot be condemning just anger outright, just blanket, just a umbrella blanket statement. Don't get mad. And I know that the Jesus driving out the money changers and chasing people with whips in the temple is like one of the favorite examples of most Christians to point out when Jesus got mad. But I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to point to Matthew 23. In Matthew 23, um, we read Matthew chapter 23, verses 13 to 39. We read, quote, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces." Oh, by the way, I don't read Greek. I rely on lexicons and commentaries to do my original language studies, but I do read English. And in English, when we want to convey the idea of shouting, we type something in all caps. Were the Gospels to be written today in English rather than in Greek, I imagine that Matthew would turn the caps lock on when typing out this chapter. In my head, when I'm reading this portion of the Gospel of Matthew silently, I just hear Jesus screaming every single word. So, okay, now I'm going to read the passage. Matthew chapter 23, verses 13 to 39. Quote, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. You blind fools! Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men! Which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous, and you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. You snakes! You brood of vipers! How will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify, others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come on this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. End quote. Yeah, I just imagine Jesus just shouting all of that very angrily. I mean, it just comes across. Jesus was ticked. Jesus was ticked off here. You just get that sense from the way his rant, and that's what it is. It's a rant. He is ranting against the unrighteousness and the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. That's the sense in which you get. That's the way it's worded. In Matthew 23, Jesus finally had enough of these pompous, hypocritical, utterly sinful, yet pretending to be exemplars of godliness, Pharisees, and he just rips them a new one. Anger itself is not inherently sinful. The Bible says Jesus is sinless. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 says, quote, For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. End quote. And in John chapter 8, verse 46, Jesus asked his audience, which of you can accuse me of sin? End quote. The question is rhetorical, and the answer to the question is implicit. No one. No one can accuse Jesus of sin because he's sinless. He's God incarnate, as John chapter 1, verses 1 to 3 teaches, among a plethora of other passages. See my presentation on the high Christology of the Gospel of Mark a few weeks ago, for example. So, since the Bible is inerrant and inspired, it therefore does not contradict itself. Jesus is sinless. Jesus got angry, and yet Jesus said that if you're angry with your brother, you're a murderer at heart. Jesus can't mean just any and all kinds of anger. He must have had a very specific kind of anger in mind. A very specific kind of anger. A kind of anger that would be characteristic of a murderer, because again, remember, he links anger, getting angry with your brother, to murder. You've heard it was said, you shall not murder, but I say to you, if you're even angry with your brother. So, okay, this kind of anger has something to do with the sin of murder. What Jesus also did not mean, and I want to point this out, is that he wasn't blanket condemning, insulting people either. Matthew 23 again is in the passage we're examining. Jesus says, again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell, Matthew 5:22. I've known Christians who think it's a sin to call anyone stupid, a fool, idiot, etc. And indeed, I think in most cases, it certainly is. In many cases, name calling is just an act of meanness. You're just doing it to be mean. We say these things to people or of people because we don't like them, because they ticked us off. We call people stupid in an attempt to hurt their feelings. So in many cases, it is sinful. But there are instances in which saying someone is an idiot is just simply speaking the truth, with no malice intended whatsoever. In the passage I just quoted, Matthew 23, Jesus called the Pharisees things like fools, blind guides, hypocrites, brood of vipers, snakes. In John's gospel, he calls them children of the devil. And I think all of us, when we read the Gospels, we know that Jesus isn't just trying to be mean. He isn't just trying to tear his opponents down because he dislikes them. He's saying these things because these things are true of them. The names stick. Likewise, the book of Proverbs has probably insulted all of us on multiple occasions. Part of me, when I go to read the book of Proverbs, I'm like, well, I'm about to be called a fool again. Um, because yeah, it's probably the book of Proverbs has probably insulted all of us on some occasion or another. Proverbs chapter 18 verses 2 to 3 says, quote, fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. Doing wrong leads to disgrace, uh, and scandalous behavior brings contempt. End quote. So this proverb just says, fools no, they don't have any interest in dialogue or discourse or hearing from the other side. They just want to bloviate. They just want to, they just want to air their own opinions. And says they're fools. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 13 says, quote, spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish, end quote. Proverbs chapter 20 verse 3 says, quote, it is to one's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel, end quote. So in other words, if you're one who's really, really quick to throw hands, um, rather than being patient and trying to diffuse the situation, Proverbs says you're a fool. These three examples from Proverbs don't single out any individual specifically, but they are applicable to real people, to real specific individuals. They speak generally of people who are quick to quarrel, spout off before getting all the facts, and so on and so forth. But they are still labeling certain types of people as fools. So we must not understand Jesus' command here as a blanket ban on acknowledging someone as unintelligent. Now, here's what Jesus did mean. Jesus was condemning murderous rage, not just anger point blank. Jesus is the great physician. And like any good physician, he treats the disease, not just the symptoms. In several portions of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he quotes a commandment of God, one of the 10 commandments given to Moses on Mount Sinai, and he says, you have heard that it was said, da 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 da, but I say to you, da 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 da. And what in several of these instances, what follows the "but I say unto you" is something that's going on inside the heart of a person. God said not to murder. But Jesus said, yes, that's all good and well, but don't even be angry with your brother. God said not to commit adultery. That's all good and well. But I say to you, don't even look at a woman with lust. What Jesus is condemning here is the kind of anger that leads up to murder. We know that because Jesus links anger to murder. You have heard it was said, you shall not murder, but I say unto you, don't even get angry. So it's the kind of anger that leads up to murder. Jesus is treating the cause of the disease, not just the symptoms. If you never even let yourself become so angry with someone that you feel like killing them, then you don't have to worry about violating the sixth commandment. Also, this is just speculation, but I can't help but wonder if Jesus had the story of Cain and Abel in mind when he said this. You go back and you read Genesis 4, and you find that Cain was envious with his brother. He was envious of his brother because God clearly favored Abel, not Cain. There are reasons why Cain wasn't right with God and why God did not accept Cain's sacrifice. And I get into this in my presentation on Genesis 4 during my primeval history series on this channel. Here on Cerebral Faith Live, I did a whole series exegeting Genesis 1 to 11. And I get into more of the Cain and Abel narrative in it has its own video. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can go check that out at your own leisure. But Cain's resentment of his brother is what ultimately led Cain to killing Abel. Indeed, before Cain killed Abel, God told Cain is crouching at your door. It desires to rule over you, but you must rule over it instead. Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to rule over you, but you must rule over it instead. That's in Genesis chapter 4, verse 7. And the result was that sin ruled over him. Cain didn't listen to God. Sin ruled over him. Cain murdered Abel. Sin always begins in the heart before it manifests itself in the external world. Sinful feelings and sinful desires always precede sinful actions. This is why Jesus is just as concerned with our thought life as he is with our conduct, because the former can influence the latter. As Jesus said in Matthew chapter 15, verse 19, quote, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander," end quote. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says, quote, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it," end quote. Murderous rage. Now, here's another question that is raised. If you have this kind of anger, it doesn't lead to murder, but you've had the feeling, is this a punishable offense? Is God going to get mad at you for having this feeling, even if you never act on it? Well, I say this tentatively, but I don't really think so, because the whole point of Jesus's command here is to just keep yourself from being tempted to commit a sin. Jesus is basically saying in a variety of different ways to flee temptation. So murderous rage may not be a punishable offense just because Jesus commanded us not to do it. I once had a dialogue with an agnostic that I've been arguing with for about 3 years now. He brought up the objection that God punishes people for victimless crimes. He said, and I quote, "Victimless crimes, the theology book I have been reading is the Bible. I see punishments for things like homosexual acts, sex outside of marriage, etc. All victimless crimes. If two men decide to have sex, who exactly is the victim? The Bible explicitly states that people will be punished for thought crimes. See Matthew 5:22, 1 Corinthians 6:9-19, for anger and covetousness, respectively," end quote. My answer then is the same as it is now. I responded with this, quote, "This verse could certainly be read as punishment of a victimless crime, but an equally valid interpretation would be that someone who is unrighteously angry with their brother is in danger of being subject to judgment, because again, sin starts in the heart and only later manifests itself in public acts that hurt others. That this is punishment for unrighteous anger itself seems more clear from translations like the NIV and the ESV, but the NLT and KJV seem more friendly to my interpretation. NLT and KJV say, "You will be in danger of judgment and in danger of the court." This verse could be interpreted either way, and I don't think it'd be wise to make a character judgment of God based on a verse that isn't clear cut. Of course, I think a finite being making a judgment on an infinitely wise God is unwise in and of itself, but I digress. But what if the former interpretation really is how we're supposed to read the passage? What if God really does punish the one who is angry with his brother and says things like, "You fool," and so on? My immediate instinct would be not to say God punishes a victimless crime. How unjust. Instead, my immediate reaction would be to wonder whether or not unrighteous anger really is victimless. We don't always know the detriments of certain actions. The consequences of our actions aren't always clear. End quote. The place of the insults in this passage. I want to look at the insults when Jesus says, "You shall not even get angry with your brother," and he says, "Anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the court." Why is Jesus including insults in this passage? The place of the insults in this passage, "Raka, you fool," indicate a context of a heated dispute. Heated disputes can sometimes escalate so badly that they eventually lead to a crime of passion. Given the context of Jesus commenting on the sixth commandment, "You shall not murder," and linking this with getting angry, the insults he mentioned aren't mere blanket bans on acknowledging someone's stupidity. Jesus is here imagining a scenario where two parties are extremely enraged at each other. They are bickering, they are angry with one another, and this unholy anger leads to one or both parties spewing vicious insults at each other. "You idiot, you fool, you dirt, you good, no good, dirty, rotten son of a you know what." I'm sure we've all witnessed two people who have had a heated fight before, whether it be a husband and wife, a father and son, a mother or daughter, or whoever. Some of these fights are pretty ugly. And while not all of them lead to violence, uh, several of them do. In the heat of the moment, in the instant where one's rage reaches the highest extent possible, Bob pulls out the gun from his holster and fires several rounds into Sam. Immediately afterwards, he feels horrified, he feels guilty, he feels ashamed, but the damage has already been done. The murderous rage finally manifested itself as actual murder. If you've now here's the thing. Here's some applicatory comments. If you find yourself in this kind of situation, run away, run fast, and run far. Jesus commands his followers to not let ourselves get to that point. De escalate a situation if you find someone provoking you and making you angrier and angrier. If you find yourself in a situation where someone is just continually provoking you and making you just more and more angry, it's just making you more and more and more furious, remove yourself from that situation. The Bible does say, after all, to flee from temptation. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22. Flee from temptation. Even if you have to literally flee from it, in the sense of running out the door, getting in your car, and speeding off. I'm not joking. If that's what you have to do it. Uh, running out the door, getting in your car, speeding off, that'll give you considerable distance between you and the other person. So run away and find a place to cool off and pray to God. You idiot, you fool, you no good, dirty, rotten son of a you know what. If you find yourself getting this angry in a heated dispute, Jesus says you're in danger. You're walking on a tightrope over the fires of hell if you find yourself in a situation like that. Ergo, don't let yourself be in a situation like that. And if you are, run away. Now, I wanted to say something else about the whole punishing the anger. I view murderous rage and I view lust, which is what we're going to be talking about, I think, next week. I see these as just forms of temptation, and I don't think Jesus would see temptation itself as being sinful. Um, it's it's no more a punishable offense to find yourself being, you know, this kind of mad or being lustful than it is to be in any situation where you're tempted to sin. But Jesus here in the Sermon on the Mount, and Paul in his second epistle to Timothy, they're saying the same thing. Flee from temptation. Don't let yourself be in this situation. Don't let yourself have this kind of anger in your heart. Don't have this kind of lust in your heart. If you don't have if you are not the kind of person who is apt to commit murder or apt to commit adultery, if you're not even that kind of person, if you don't even have that inside of you, then you don't have to worry about the sin manifesting itself in reality. Now let's look at the next portion of Jesus' teaching here. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 to 26, quote, "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny." End quote. Jesus here emphasizes the importance of reconciliation. Jesus' example has has a first century Jew bringing his example of reconciliation is of a first century Jew bringing a sacrifice to the Jerusalem temple, and when just as he's laying it down, just as he's about to offer it up, he suddenly remembers, oh, um, there's a brother who has something against me, and so he just ups and leaves, and he goes to ask his brother for forgiveness to make amends. In his book, The Rabbi on the Mount, How Jesus' Judaism Clarifies the Sermon on the Mount, Phil Weingart says, and this is on page 117, that, quote, "It's easy to see the direction of Jesus' instruction. Staying on good terms with our fellow citizens in the kingdom of God is more important than sacrifice or religious duty. Jesus made this point in several places in the Gospels. The part that we might miss because we don't know his culture is how emphatic Jesus was being. He was using outrageous hyperbole. There was only one temple in Judaism. Jews traveled from all over the region to visit it 3 times a year, all at the same time. After a long trip on foot, leading a large and expensive animal or purchasing such an animal in Jerusalem, they might have had to wait in a long line of supplicants, possibly for a very long time, until a priest was available to sacrifice it. The travel, purchasing, and waiting combined might have taken a full week. Interrupting the process after one had finally reached the altar would have been ridiculous. It would have been like one of us in modern America having been invited to present a paper to the Secretary of the Interior, and once having traveled to Washington, been admitted to the executive office building, shaken the secretary's hand, and been seated in his office, suddenly leaping up and telling him, "Hold on, don't move. I really have to take care of this first," and then stepping out of the office to make a phone call to settle a dispute with your friend George. You wouldn't get back into the secretary's office. The opportunity would have passed. End quote. Sometimes reconciliation is not possible. We should always strive for reconciliation. We should we should forgive people when they sin against us, and they ask us for forgiveness, and if we're the one who did the wrong, we should ask them to forgive us, and we should strive to make amends and to fix the relationship as best as possible. But sometimes reconciliation is not possible. For one thing, not everyone will forgive you. That you have to be aware of that fact. Even if they claim to be Christians and claim to be in the kingdom of God, they may refuse to forgive you, or maybe they'll struggle to forgive you. And for people outside the kingdom of God, they're even less likely to forgive you because they're not paying attention to Jesus' command to, hey, forgive others. If you forgive others, God will forgive you. If you don't forgive others, God won't forgive you. The Christian will forgive because he has been forgiven, but the non-Christian may not, depending on how big the transgression is. He may or he may not. Secondly, even if you relinquish a grudge against someone, that doesn't necessarily mean you should reconcile with them, because the person in question may be a habitual abuser. They may be someone who, if you spend a lot of time around them, they will just make you miserable. There are some people who, even if they acknowledge their wrongs and ask, even if they acknowledge their wrongs, and even if they ask you for forgiveness, they are the type of people who have very toxic personalities. They may be physically abusive, like in many instances of domestic violence, and we'll be talking about that later in this series when we get to Jesus talking about divorce and the grounds of divorce. What's on what grounds can a woman divorce her husband and vice versa? We're going to be getting into that later. Or they may just be they may be verbally abusive, or they may just have the kind of personality where they always put you down and make you feel inferior. Um, they may just be toxic people that you probably shouldn't hang around, spend too much time communicating with for the sake of your mental and emotional health. Um, Even if they ask you for forgiveness, maybe they don't have any intention of changing, or maybe they're trying to change but they can't. What I'm trying to say is it is okay to distance yourself from these people for the sake of your mental and emotional health. I have been the victim of bad experiences with Christians. Um, just absolute just absolutely toxic people. And with some of them, I put up with them for a long time, but it got to the point where I just needed to cut ties with them for the sake of my emotional health. I won't go into the details, but I don't think God requires us to be friends with people who only ever make us feel bad. That God does not require us to be friends with people who only ever make us feel bad about ourselves. Forgive them, yes. Don't hold a grudge against them. Relinquish any resentment or anger you feel against them. Love them, yes. If they're ever in need of food, water, clothing, medicine, or whatever, provide for them, yes. But you don't have to hang out with them. Even if they are Christians, or at least claim to be, you don't necessarily have to hang out with them. Reconcile if you can, but sometimes it's not possible, because sometimes if you try to stay in the relationship, whether it be a marriage relationship, or even just a friendship, you're going to you're going to be harming yourself emotionally in the long haul. But if you are the aggressor, if you're the abuser, the person may not forgive you. I really wish I included this verse in the slide, but in the book of Romans, Paul says, "As far as it depends upon you, be at peace with everyone." Now, pay no attention to this Q&A slide. It is not applicable this week because, again, you're watching pre-recorded audio. We're not doing. You can see my window behind me. There's some sunlight shining through. I usually do these at 8 p.m. when it's twilight and the sun's just about going down. So sorry about that, but it can't be helped. The time you're watching this, I'll be at work. But yeah, next week, hopefully, I will be able to be here and do it live, so we can get a Q&A going. Uh, I will definitely, if there is nothing else. Um, if there's nothing else going on, I will be here next Saturday, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And if in the unlikely event I can't, well, then it'll be another pre-recorded audio, but you'll still have something to watch either way. So thank you for watching. By the way, if you want more apologetics content, blog, podcast, videos, check out www.cerebralfaith.net. I recently uploaded a video to YouTube that shows people how to maneuver the website, because some people just seem to have a hard time maneuvering around the website, because they would ask me, "Hey, do you have any like blog articles on whatever, or do you have any videos on whatever?" And I'm like, "Well, you would know if I had content on this if you just went and looked." And so I started thinking maybe people don't know how to maneuver the website. So I made a guide. I made like a guide to show you how to maneuver through the blog section and the video section, and hopefully this will make things easier if if you have trouble finding things. By the way, if you want to support this ministry financially, go to www.patreon.com/cerebralfaith. I'm going to have to edit the patron benefits, though, in a way, because I'm going to be kind of changing the way that I put out content, because I figured out that I really, 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 really hate making videos. I don't hate doing these live streams. I love doing these live streams. These are a blast. Well, this is not a live stream per se, but yeah, I love doing Cerebral Faith live. So I love doing the podcast, but those videos that are like kind of reminiscent of inspiring philosophy styles. They use a lot of stock videos, a lot of stock footage, pictures and stuff, and visual effects. Yeah, I really don't like those. I don't like doing those. I did those for a time. I probably made maybe 40 or 50 of those videos and uploaded them, but they are just so time consuming to make. Like one 15-minute video can take like 8 hours of editing time. Just to get out a 15-minute message, it takes like 8 hours. And if the video is 20 or 30 minutes, that's going to take maybe close to 20 hours of editing. It's just very time consuming. So what I am thinking of doing going forward is, here on YouTube, I'm going to do live stream videos every summer from about, May until September-ish. But I'm also going to have these little snippets from the live stream that are about maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes long. Just take little snippets out of Cerebral Faith live episodes and upload those. And there'll be like a little introductory video. And there'll be and at the end of the segment, there's going to be like a closing video that says, click here to view the entire presentation, to prompt people to watch the entire episode. This way I can get good video content out without having to, spend ridiculous amounts of time editing. Basically, think about Michael Heiser's McClot videos. They'll be like maybe 5-10 minutes taken out of a presentation, out of a lecture he did at the Awakening School of Theology. He didn't just show up and give a 5-minute lecture. That's clearly like an excerpt out of a much longer talk. Well, I'm thinking of doing those. So, for example, in my Hell series, there's a video where I take on several objections to annihilationism from eternal torment advocates. Well, what I could do, let's just say, hey, Evan, I don't want to watch this whole 1-hour video where you deal with all these objections. I just want to know what you think about Revelation 14. Well, there'll be a segment that's where I deal with that chapter and why that doesn't support eternal torment. And Evan, I just want to know what you think about the argument that unquenchable fire, that clearly means the fire goes on forever, and so does the torment. Well, what do you think about that argument? Oh, there'll be a segment of that. Be like 10, 15 minutes, however long that lasted during the stream. And so I think this will be there will be less visuals, except for what I include in the PowerPoint slides. But I think this will be good, because you guys don't show up to the YouTube channel just to see a lot of cool videos. As beautiful as those other videos are, you don't show up for that. You show up because you're interested in what I have to say. And not everyone is going to want to watch a 1 hour video. So there will be these shorter videos, these snippets out of Cerebral Faith Live, and then there will be a prompt for people to watch a call to action for people to watch the longer one that it was taken from, if they want to. Maybe some people would be like, oh wow, I like this short little segment here. I'd like to listen to the whole thing. The problem, though, is that since Cerebral Faith Live will be the source of my short upload videos, it will be the web show, but it is also the audio for the podcast. It's no longer going to be the case that patrons are going to be getting early access to videos and early access to podcast episodes, because the short uploads, like all of the content, will be available while it's being made, like with the exception of this week. The only thing that early access that I can really give is the blog. So I'm going to have to be thinking about that, but I do need to go this route, because Cerebral Faith is just, it's becoming like a full-time job, and that's bad because it isn't my full-time job. And so I need to kind of downscale a little bit so that I don't have to work myself to death. Yeah, and when Cerebral Faith Live and the Cerebral Faith podcast is going to be a seasonal thing. So it's going to be going from like April-ish, May-ish to September. It's going to be like a summer thing. What this means is that in those, the fall, the winter, early spring, I won't be really making any media content. And so I will except for maybe the snippets I mentioned of Cerebral Faith Live. So I'll have more time to start blogging again. So maybe you'll get early access to articles, but I won't be able to blog. I won't be able to blog like here in the summer because I'm too busy working on the web show and the podcast and the snippets. So anyway, I'm saying all of this at the end of the program. I ended rather early, so I had a little bit more time to talk. Because if you're a patron, or if you want to become a patron, what kind of benefits other than early access to the written articles would you like to have? Because two of the, I guess I could give you early access to the snippets, even though the content even though the excerpts are available publicly, they're just not available as snippets. Would that be something that you would count as worthwhile? I don't know. But you will get early access to the articles, and you'll still get shout outs on the podcast, and maybe I'll show your names on the snippets as well. So anyway, speaking of patron shout outs, I want to give a shout out to David Shannon, Red Blade Flame, Steel Cat, Slam RN, Andrew Milnick, Nathan Hamilton, Jordan Hampton, Brandon Whitaker, and David Parrish. And if you'd like to become a patron and support Cerebral Faith financially, go to www.patreon.com/Cerebral Faith. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like the video and subscribe. Peace out, God bless, and keep using the brains that God gave you.